All right, good evening and welcome to Rev War Revelry. We hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. So we're just going to sit around. This is literally, I guess, a square table with all the tiles, but this round table discussion with questions that came in from the audience who have literally put up with us for, 34 straight weeks. So thanks for all you listeners and watchers and posters and et cetera. But without further ado, let's throw the first question out there, and that is the most overrated general officer. We'll do colonel and above. So we'll throw it up to the guy sitting at the Boston Massacre site right now, Mark Maloy.
I just mentioned before we hopped on Ethan Allen. And granted, I don't know that much about him, but one of the stories that we heard on our ERW trip from last year was when we went up to Fort Ticonderoga. One of his most famous moments was demanding the surrender from the British officer there, which upon our arrival and discussion of the event, apparently he did much. He kind of puffed that event up more than it actually was, and Billy's probably favorite, Benedict Arnold, actually played a bigger role in that than Ethan Allen. But yeah, no, I'd say Ethan Allen, it's a household name. He's kind of been vaunted as a Revolutionary War hero. But I'd say this might come out of ignorance, but I'd say he's overrated.
Well, Mark can no longer go to Vermont, so
my sister
he's starting to ruin all those northern states, and Mark's not going to be allowed in much of the northern states.
There are a lot of states that Mark's not allowed to go to anymore, so we'll just add that one to the list.
That's another revelry there. The states that Mark is not allowed to go to anymore. The 1 hour version. So, well, since he talked about Benedict Arnold, let's pass it to Billy. Since you mentioned Benedict Arnold, most overrated officer.
I'm going to say that the most overrated general is the Marquis de Lafayette.
Ooh.
Yeah. I think obviously you cannot deny the importance of him obviously coming here and volunteering his services, his relationship with Washington, his courage on a battlefield obviously is second to none. But I think as an actual independent commander leading troops on a field by himself, he stumbled into a lot more trouble than many other Continental Army officers did. And I know, Phil, in your upcoming book, you're going to talk about kind of his debacle at Barron Hill, where he almost gets himself bagged and his entire force there.
Yeah, I was contemplating him. I'm actually reading a biography of Lafayette right now, and Washington tells him do not take a fixed position, and so Howe doesn't back. The British don't force you from a position, and what does he do? He goes right out and makes a fixed position. So, literally the exact opposite of what Washington told him. One of the guys that popped up in actually our recent Rev War weekend down to the Yorktown campaign, I want to throw Mad Anthony Wayne as one of the most overrated officers. Mad Anthony, is a name given to him not because of any great prowess, but what exactly does he do except charge headlong into something? The other person, I didn't know if we were doing militia, but I would do Thomas Sumter as one, but I also like the state of South Carolina, so I want to head back to the Palmetto State. But Anthony Wayne at Green Spring, he just attacks. That's all he does. He attacks. He given these assignments. His assignment at Paoli or whatever is to actually kind of little more strategic, and he just blows it off and gets half his force butchered there as well. So Mad Anthony Wayne's a guy that I think should have been put on a smaller leash and giving direct assignments. You need someone to attack heads first in something, give it to him. But putting him and Lafayette together in Virginia, you had two guys that were not well suited for independent command, and the one that might have helped them, von Steuben, is too busy training soldiers way out west of Richmond. So I'm going to throw Mad Anthony Wayne as mine. But since now we're in Virginia, we'll go to Mr. Orrison.
Well, Billy took mine with Lafayette, so I'm going to stir some controversy with Mr. Maloy. If we're talking specific, just strictly military, George Washington.
Ooh.
Obviously he kept the army together. So as far as a leader goes, there's no comparison. But as far as commander in the field, and this is really just to get Mark going, to be honest with you, because he's going to watch his Bears lose here in a few hours. But really, other than Trenton and Princeton, he really doesn't have any military victories in the field to speak of. Again, he does keep the army together, and part of this is a jest a little bit. But I do think it's hard to rate Washington's command presence in the field because he is so revered, right? Like he's a myth. He's the Marble Man type figure, and so it's hard to actually take a nice critical look at his abilities in the field. But I think when you look at him in the field, obviously Yorktown's his best accomplishment, and without the French, Mark, it ain't happening, buddy.
No, you're wrong there, because he does have some very important tactical victories. Trenton and Princeton, and second Trenton as well. Those three battles were all victories on the tactical side. Washington's presence on a battlefield, bearing himself to the all the way up in front of the troops at Princeton, leading his soldiers.
Is that the proper place for him, though?
At that moment, it was absolutely. The cause is on the line, and if those never happened, the revolution would have been destroyed in the first winter. So I would say Washington is still. I would actually argue the opposite, because I think he's routinely diminished as he lost more battles than he won. I think this has become a common line of iconoclasm of trying to, hey, here's the guy on the biggest pedestal, let's try and take him down.
Actually, at least a point, and a guy actually, Robert Ryan, wrote a question, how about the British side as well? Could you argue that if Washington's greatest victories are because of the failure of the British to put a more experienced officers out in those places? Is it a failure of War of Cornwallis than a victory of Washington? And so we do British leaders that are worse British leaders, or do we just all pick Henry Clinton and call it a day? So,
well, back to Trenton and Princeton real quick before Mark jumps in on that. That's his baby. I think Mark would agree with me on this. I think Princeton's a better battle victory for Washington than Trenton, just because he is facing Cornwallis. He is facing,
Well, he was facing Cornwallis at second Trenton.
Yeah. Well, I can't wrap in second Trenton and Princeton together, kind of, just because they're so linked. But yeah.
Correct. And that's, this where I do want to mention, we mentioned the British side. I do think Cornwallis is sometimes overrated. I think he is a good general, but second Trenton was a momentous opportunity, and Cornwallis, says, oh, we'll bag the old fox in the morning, and fails to guard the road off on the right flank or whatever. So Washington's army is able to totally flank his army. And then from our recent trip just down to Yorktown, for him being such an aggressive commander and all this other kind of stuff, he just seems, I think some people mentioned it on our tours, is he just seems kind of like worn out or tired or whatever, because he doesn't follow up Green Spring, the victory there. He just kind of goes to Yorktown and is just sort of content sitting there. It doesn't seem, this aggressive commander that you kind of see in the backcountry of South Carolina and North Carolina, chasing the Dan. He seems aggressive, and he has his definite positive points, but I would say, sometimes he's overrated as being, the best general on the British side. Granted, Howe and Clinton also have their foibles, so.
Well, someone mentioned in the chat Tarleton, which is a great response. He does have his accomplishments, but I don't think his accomplishments match the fame. I think anyone that's interested in American Revolution has probably heard of Bannister Tarleton, right? So I just, just looking at what he does in the field, obviously you have Waxhaws, and, you had the cavalry operations there in South Carolina right after Charleston. But other than that, we saw him down there in Gloucester in his last field command, and doesn't do too well there either. And, for the amount of fame he gets, I don't think probably his accomplishments match the fame.
Yeah.
But Billy is our resident Brit, so I'll let Billy take that one.
I was going to agree with you there with Bannister Tarleton. I think even like his actions, Tarleton's quarter essentially becomes a rallying cry, and it really instills more of a feeling of vengeance in the Southern colonists and kind of streaking fear into them. So yeah, I think his actions have more of dire consequences for the British in that regard than what actually happens, or his battlefield successes are not so. But I would have to say I was going to go with Cornwallis as well, because I think Clinton is a very, very good battlefield commander. I don't think he is a good strategist in the long run as commanding all of his Majesty's forces in North America. I think William Howe, out of those three, is the best. The only problem is he really doesn't understand what that center of gravity is for the American cause. He thinks capturing these major political and economic centers will bring the colonists to their knees, when really his victory was always directly in front of him, and that was crushing Washington's army, which he allowed to escape multiple times. So they definitely all had their flaws and contributed in their own ways to Britain's overall failure.
I'd like to tell this here now that we have another comment that overrated. We'll just keep picking at Mark is Light Horse Harry Lee.
That's picking at me too, by the way. He's a Prince William boy where I work. Right?
Oh, there he is. So throwing it out there for those Virginians here. So someone said he's one of the most overrated leaders of the American Revolution. So Robert Ryan is throwing barbs at Mark and Rob here with Light Horse.
No, I kind of tend to agree with that a little bit. Light Horse has got his Legion. He does do some daring things up in New Jersey, New York, and obviously in South Carolina with Greene. But obviously, in popular memory, Light Horse Harry is Robert E. Lee's dad. So, I mean, that plays a little bit into it. The best thing about Light Horse Harry Lee to me, as someone who studies the American Revolution, is the book that he writes about the Southern campaign that so many historians cite in their works, even though he's not at 75% of the things he's writing about, right? But I used to have it somewhere. Oh, here it is. But reprint version here. I think his fame is mostly because of what he says at Washington, first in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of the countrymen. And of course his role as he really wasn't a dad to Robert E. Lee, let's be honest. He was a father, or what you want to see, right? Whatever you want to call it, but he's not someone that was there to help raise him. But that's a good point, though. Light Horse does get a lot of credit, but doesn't really do a whole lot.
I mean, but his time in South, I mean, I think one of the things that he's not known as well for, and is actually one of his biggest accolades, is actually working with the militia and the partisans in South Carolina. He's one of those officers that he worked successfully with Francis Marion and others for a few small but important victories. And so he's one of those guys that can collaborate. And I mean, you see it so hard between the Continentals and militia about the distrust or the lack of coordination. So I mean, there it is. But in the large scheme of things, there's really not a great cavalry commander in the Red War on the American side. I mean, think about it. You got a few William Washington or Pulaski. I mean, you don't really have a cavalryman that put the hat on itself.
Yeah. I mean, I think stuff is also really interesting and pretty vicious. Pyle's Massacre down in North Carolina was, part of Light Horse Harry's guys, basically a Waxhaws in reverse, where they just really butcher whole column of loyalists down in North Carolina. And then there's also a story of early in the war when he's up in New Jersey. I think, there's some of the people, some deserters got caught, and he told Washington he wanted to execute them and then chop their heads off and put them on pikes outside the camps serve as a warning. And Washington quickly wrote and said, "Don't do that. You're going to you're going to give propaganda to the British." Which it was already too late because apparently he already did it to one deserter, so they had to quickly take that stuff down. But it's just an interesting anecdote. Really shows you how brutal some of the war could be. And Mike Cessair wrote a good biography on Light Horse Harry too, called "Wedded to My Sword." But as Rob was saying though too, like you can't really divorce these guys from their later public careers. I mean, Washington's tied to being the father of our country. Lafayette is tied to being, you know, America's favorite Frenchman. And Light Horse Harry, yeah, is tied to all of his activities after the war as well. So I think all of this is colored by that whenever we think about what their role in our memory is as far as how effective they were, how good they were.
I think we've run full circle.
What's the opposite of that? Who gets no attention? I mean, I think I'm always coming across these guys' names that they have no attention, like General Sterling, like all these other kinds of guys who are kind of important, especially like in the early part of the war, and you know, that are totally ignored, or you know, nobody knows who these people are whatsoever. And I'll throw that out as one who's totally underrated. I'd say General, you know, Lord Sterling, because I feel like a lot of people don't know who he is. I think he played an important role in the Battle of Long Island. He definitely plays important roles at Trenton and Princeton, commanding brigade there. You know, even at Long Island, he was captured by the British, refusing to surrender, and then was exchanged later. So, I don't know. I just think that's kind of interesting too to think about. You guys have anybody?
If we're going to do that, I'll throw out the Iron Man, John Stark. So not the guy from Stark Industries, not Robert Downey Jr., but I mean, Stark is there on the he holds the flank at Bunker Hill, I think, down on the next to the river there, and then he also, I mean, crushes the British during the Saratoga campaign, and pushes them back out. And it's what the greatest quote or whatever. Someone charge boys, or Molly Stark sleeps a widow tonight. So I mean, he's the guy that is overshadowed even in that New England Army, where you always think of Seth Warner or Ethan Allen or any of these other militia type guys in that area. But John Stark is the guy who does great yeoman service both at Bennington and at Bunker Hill.
Plays an important role.
Yeah. So that's mine.
Yeah. I'd say there's a couple of foreign officers that usually get overlooked, at least outside of the Rev War community. I mean, you have like Casimir Pulaski, even Thaddeus Kosciuszko, Louis Duportal, who I think it's Duportal who does the siege works at Yorktown for Washington's army, becomes his engineer. So these, you know, the foreign officers too coming over here, they really do provide the American army with a lot of tools that we were lacking prior to their arrival.
I'm gonna throw one out there. I'm gonna get beat up again, but that's okay. Mark and I did a American Battlefield Trust Zoom on Charleston to Camden, and I think they airs tomorrow, Mark, or Wednesday. I can't remember. American Battlefield Trust. But anyways, catch us there. But I defended Horatio Gates for a little bit, which before I start working on researching Camden, I would never have done. But once you research Camden, there are some things he does that obviously there are no excuses for, like, you know, running to North Carolina faster than anybody else. But, you know, I don't think his battle plan leading up to the Battle of Camden is really, you know, it's a lot misunderstood. And a lot of those historians down in Camden that have been doing some great research and great work have, you know, been trying to promote that, you know, that research about how, you know, Gates isn't looking to attack Cornwallis. He's looking to set up a defensive position and receive Cornwallis north of Camden, not necessarily attack Cornwallis. Gates doesn't have any, you know, delusions of grandeur because of his militia. Also, Gates is, you know, really criticized for his march to Camden. I do think that part of that plays in with the militia. He was trying to get the North Carolina militia to meet him at his camp, and they refused to move. They basically refused the Continental officers' orders, and following that, governor of North Carolina. And so Gates, I think, it moves south quickly because he's worried about those 700-800 North Carolinian militia that he's afraid that Cornwallis or the British in general, you know, Rawdon or whoever may get to before he gets there. So I think, you know, we attack Gates a lot. And of course, what Gates does later in the war with the Cabal and and all the controversy there is not excusable. But I think I tend to defend him a little bit when it comes to Camden. Can't defend him on leaving the field as quickly as he does, but I defend him on his plan for Camden. And of course, as we all know, the four of us know, Mark does a great Horatio Gates impersonation, but we'll save that for a different day. But I also want to say I want to say Gage too. You know, Phill and I working on Lexington and Concord, you become kind of sympathetic to him a little bit. He's put here in Boston. All the authorities over in England and London have totally underestimated what's happening in Massachusetts, and he's given obviously he has regulars with him, but there's a letter he sends. If you think 10,000 is enough, send 20,000. If you think 20,000 is enough, send 40,000, and so on and so on. He's trying to let them know that the situation in Massachusetts is getting out of hand, and he's put into a no-win situation. No matter what he does, something is going to happen to start war. It'd be very hard for him to, at that point, in my opinion, to, put out the fire of revolution. And of course, Lexington and Concord's laid at his feet. Obviously, Bunker/Breeds Hill is laid at his feet as well. But I think he's put in a position that is really a no-win position for him to be in. So I want to throw him out there.
I agree, and I mean, as a dovetail off that, I mean, what he allows the Sons of Liberty and everything, the freedom he gives them to organize. I mean, Warren is still in the town. Dr. Warren still in the town, sending messages out, and I mean, they know about his activities. So I think, the restraint that Gage shows, we always vilify him, but I mean, he really gives. He might be one of the best conduits to the revolution by allowing this moment to happen and not clamping it right down. So, it's all because of his wife too, who's, pulling the strings, obviously. So, Americans love that story. That has to be her that is passing on the news and notes and everything. So.
Well, according to the History Channel, Sons of Liberty, it was her, right?
Oh yeah. I don't think we want to go down that road, though, do we?
No, we're getting a lot of good comments over here about overlooked officers. John Glover is a good one too, Mark. Obviously he does more than just Trenton, but obviously he plays a significant role there at Trenton.
Yeah, he also saved the army coming from Brooklyn over rowing across the East River to Manhattan, saving the army there. And of course, rowed everybody across the Delaware River. Christmas. So, he's definitely, probably more known in Marblehead, Massachusetts than nationally. Deserves national recognition.
All right, I kind of have a question I wrote down here. Kind of ties into what we've been talking about and talking about George Washington earlier too. Who do you think commands the Continental Army if George Washington is either, say, killed or sacked by Congress in late 76 or early 1777? Who do you think that would be?
Like if he was killed at the battle?
Say he's killed at Princeton, or maybe after New York he's relieved of command, or after the Philadelphia campaign he's relieved. Like who do you think's next in line really to take his position, or if not, who was actually in line? Who would you choose? Who do you think would actually be able to fill his shoes?
I think it would be either Charles Lee or Horatio Gates. Charles Lee, of course, is captured in early December 1776, so he was off the table. So if he was killed at Princeton, then I think it probably would go to Gates. In fact, Gates had left to go to Congress, which was then down in Baltimore. I believe hoped to get that role. Whether either of them would be able to, fill the shoes of Washington, I don't know. Perhaps militarily, but I don't know about as far as the whole American cause and the idea of surrendering power and deference to civilian authority and all these other kinds of things that made Washington indispensable. Obviously, I think, Greene emerges later in the war as, Washington's right-hand man, but Greene in fall of 76 was like persona non grata after allowing Fort Lee to fall to the Fort Washington, Fort Lee to fall to the British, which he suggested, they try and hold on to those. So I don't know. That's a really good, interesting question. I think it would depend on the exact time, but I think Lee and Gates are constantly kind of hanging in the wings there, waiting. I think both of them pressed at some point to fire for that.
I agree with Mark. If he's sacked after New York, the only logical person there is probably Lee. Sterling and Sullivan are both captured and the battles of New York. Greene is not what he is later. He's still a rising star, and same as Knox as well in the artillery. The only other one is Putnam, but he goes home as well, and he's not the mental probably fortitude in advanced age. So I think if Washington is say captured or sacked, Lee is not captured at Basking Ridge because he's going to make that march to take over the army. The only reason he's dithering is because he doesn't want to join a losing cause and connect his men to that. So, later on, if it's after Valley Forge, it'll be interesting. If Lee is put in charge, say Washington gets sick at Valley Forge in 1778, is it Lee at that time? He is second in command, but he's new to the army, having recently returned. So would they have put someone else in there as well? That's I think the answer. So it all depends on the time, but thank God I guess he didn't get sacked after New York. But he the commenter said he did want Greene. So that was after Greene had established himself as the quartermaster as general later in the war, but definitely not on the retreat in New Jersey. Greene would not have been a logical or even accepted choice, I think, by the remains of the army.
Somebody said Benedict Arnold. So, Billy, at that point in time in the war, what's up with Benedict Arnold?
Benedict Arnold's up in Canada during that point into 1776. And then when he comes back down finally to Washington's army, then he's sent up to Connecticut to help repulse the British raids there. And he's wounded there. And then after that, that's when he's actually promoted to Major General. But still, even at that point, and if we're going by seniority, even though Arnold had been one of the original generals in the army, there was still, the 5 others or so that outranked him. So it isn't until later on that his proper rank as a senior general is restored. So yeah, it's a very good possibility.
Rank would have played a big role. And I also think I'd be interested to know who would also accept the position at that point, being that it looked like such a losing cause. Even Washington in 1775, when he accepts command, says how he thinks that he might not be successful in this endeavor anyway. So kind of interesting to see if somebody would step up to at that point in the war, being that it's nadir basically. Yeah.
Man, what a big what if that was. You would have Washington down, Arnold maybe taking command of the army. Billy would be our modern day version of Mark, talking about how great Arnold is. And Mark would be like Billy trying to defend Washington with his short term of service. It'd be a total flip.
It is also, it's one of those things that it's amazing the Continental Congress did kind of stick with Washington through all these, troublesome periods. And if you what time is it? 32. Okay, I'll bring in the Civil War. It's just amazing to look at the Civil War and see Lincoln's kind of constant changing of the guard throughout that war, as far as the commander-in-chief of the Union Army, and to see that there was no attempt to do that during the Revolution in large respect.
I think a big part of that, though, is there is no elected commander-in-chief in charge of the government, right? That's not how the Continental Congress and government was set up. So makes it, you have the Board of War, obviously, but it's more complicated. than having one person in charge, right? You know, and removing somebody from command. And also, I think too, Mark, you know, it's politics. It's Virginia, and Virginia plays a huge role, even though there's not many battles fought here. They're supplying the South. You know, they're paying for a lot. So I think having a Virginian, as John Adams famously says, you know, it's very important to keep a Virginian in place. But, you know, without Trenton and Princeton, who knows how long they stick with him, really.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean,
his army was gonna on the verge of dissolving anyways because they're
right.
expired. So if he made no movement at Trenton and Princeton, the army dissolved. So Washington's in command of a few hundred guys or whatever. Yeah, correct. They probably would have to step in at that point because there would be nothing to stop, you know, the British from marching straight over the Delaware and, you know, continuing to take Philadelphia in 76 or early 77.
One question, Phil, if I can jump in, that we got somewhere. Actually, it might have been an email, but since we're all public historians, we like to promote sense of place. Our favorite sites to visit, American Revolutionary sites, early American history, because, you know, French Indian War ties in, War of 1812 as well. So, and Mark, you can't say Trenton. You got to pick something else. You got to pick something that's not Trenton and Princeton. All right. But, you know, it'd be cool to hear some of you guys' favorite places to visit and why you think it's a worthwhile place to visit. And, you know, I'm trying to think of a place that maybe people don't know, right? I mean, we just went to Yorktown a few weeks ago. People know Yorktown, but I'm trying to think of places that I've been recently that were really fascinating to me that maybe aren't some of the larger sites. What do you think, Phil? You get that you're you know, the wheels are turning.
It is. I mean, obviously, I've spent some time either writing or working on, some of the winter encampments, Morristown, Valley Forge. Initially, they come to mind, especially all the other history in Morristown. And then I started focusing up on, the Boston area, not just Lexington and Concord, but like the smaller like sites around town, Dorchester Heights, or going downtown and the walk. What always fascinated me with Boston is that it's a modern city, but it's hold on to its historical like center. There was randomly an office building that had a plaque on it that this was the home of Robert Treat Paine, one of the delegates, and so forth. And so that's what I always find. Morristown, New Jersey, Boston is kind of off the beaten path. That you can walk these places and see these plaques on houses that commemorate other parts of that history that is built up. Down the street in Morristown, obviously it's very famous now, and I probably took Mark's answer because it's about Hamilton. But you have, of course, the Schuyler House there. But you have Morristown is such an interesting crossroads, and you go over into Springfield Farms or in the Watchung Mountains, which people drive back and forth today and don't even know that is just a barrier and everything. So maybe Morristown is still that. And I know we got a bunch of people from the Morristown site, but it's one of those ones that you can kind of get a sense from. You have both Washington's headquarters plus Jockey Hollow in different places, and you can kind of mix and match officers with the enlisted. If I can throw one more out, I've always been interested in the Fort Necessity, that the Braddock's Road, something about sitting at Jemimeville Glen and reminiscing that here's, a guy that, his career could have been done right there. Assassinating a French officer, and then, recovering from there. So just the thought of what Washington must have thought of when they scalped some of the French there, and thinking what's going through a head of a 19 or 20-year-old there compared to what happens later on when the French come marching into New York in 1780. And now they're partners in fighting this rebellion. So Fort Necessity, and I'll pick two, Boston and Morristown, because that's my top three.
Yeah, I'd definitely agree that Jumonville, Glen, and Fort Necessity are definitely two of my favorite sites in the entire country. Because like you said, at Jumonville Glen, there's really no other place like it in the country where you can literally stand there, and the area itself is so remote and unchanged that it literally feels like you do step back in time. Like Washington says, you can still kind of hear the bullets whistling. Believe me, there's something charming in the sound. But after that, I'd have to say Fort Ticonderoga is one of the most pristine 18th century sites in the country. The museum there is second to none when it comes to 18th century artifacts. And just being up there in the Lake George, Lake Champlain River corridor, one of the most important water highway systems in North America since Europeans came here, and just the history of Ticonderoga itself and the Carillon battlefield outside of it. You still have the original French earthworks that were then reconstructed by Americans when they returned there during the Revolution. But just standing there, that battlefield itself, it was the Battle of Carillon's the bloodiest battle fought prior to the Civil War in the United States and Canada, and it's still overlooked and forgotten to this day.
Mark, I'll go last. I'll make it easier for you. It's always hard to go last because everyone's picked everything.
Okay. Well, I have to shout out to Trenton and Princeton, even though you say, just because Trenton is so built up, and a lot of people don't realize the importance of the site. I was just telling somebody about my book the other day about how it tells you where all these, battle sites happen. I mean, where James Monroe got wounded in the Battle of Trenton is today just a piece of asphalt on the roadside. There's no marker, there's no wayside, there's no interpretation of it, but it's just kind of like, that's where it happened. And yeah, it's the total opposite of Jumonville Glen. You don't feel like you're transported back in time whatsoever, but you are standing on that hallowed ground, even though it has been built up. It's still the same ground they were on. And you can still see some of the terrain features of the time. But I digress. I will say, I'll say my favorite historic site in general is Mount Vernon, because I think that's the best site to go to in numerous respects. First of all, it's a fantastic site. The amount of original items and the amount of the original house there, to be able to go there where Washington called home. To go to the actual tomb where Washington's buried is, an amazing experience to be there. They have a museum and education center that drives home the important stuff about the Revolutionary War and the French and Indian War and everything else, and Washington's centrality to it, of course. But yeah, no, I just think and basically also because growing up, going there really instilled in me the importance of Washington, but also the importance of historic sites, learning from the site, being at the place where history happened. I learned more as a kid going to Mount Vernon than I did, in actual school. So that always resonated with me. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to work in public history and be able to do this kind of stuff ever since I was a kid. Shout out to Mount Vernon.
Yeah, a site that no one's been to, ever heard of before, Mark. I mean, it's
Shocker, right?
Well, I mean, it's hard to. All right, I want to hear from you, the site that nobody's heard of and nobody's been to.
Well, I got plenty of those, but I'm gonna go to Fort Ligonier, which is an awesome museum. Obviously the fort is a recreation, but the museum there is fantastic. It's a great museum about the French Indian War. It doesn't just cover what's happening in Pennsylvania, it covers what's happening on the worldwide scope, talking about, one of the first world wars. And the exhibit in there was, kind of blew me away. I expected a good museum, but I got a great museum. And the exhibits there, the artifacts they have are from around the world. It's an amazing collection of artifacts. They do it thematically by, different geographic regions of the world where the French and the British and other countries too are all fighting in what we call the 7 Years' War, the French Indian War. So it's a great site. I know it's not unheard of, Mark, but I think it's probably more unheard of than Mount Vernon. But I had a chance to go up there with Bert Dunkerley and Mark Wilcox and Doug Crenshaw, some other ERW, ECW friends of ours a couple of years ago. And we went there into Bushy Run Battlefield, which is another great site that I'd never been to before. Nice park there, commemorating that small battle there. But I'll go to Fort Ligonier. I'll go French and Indian War with Billy. But Mount Vernon is great. I mean, I have friends who work there, and I know you do too, Mark. So Mount Vernon is a great spot. And Mark and I are lucky enough that we live within a few minutes drive of Mount Vernon. So, but we just went to the new museum in Yorktown, the American Revolutionary War Museum in Yorktown, which is pretty nice too. Yorktown is not unknown, but that museum is pretty new, and if you haven't got a chance to go down there, definitely go check it out. It's worth going into if you go to visit the battlefield. It's worth seeing that museum as well. The exhibits are brand new, top notch, just like the one in Philly too.
Yeah, there's been a lot of new museums recently, or at least upgrades and stuff like that. And I'm hoping it's a trend that will continue as we build towards 2026 and the 250th anniversary of the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, and someone said Fort Lee too. That's a cool spot. Just before you go across that damn bridge, but into New York. But it's a cool place.
I think it's the same thing that I was saying about Trenton. The whole Manhattan Island. There's battlefields all across that are totally built over and covered up, but those are important sites that should and could be interpreted, at least to let people know that where they're walking, living, and everything like that is a battlefield. Same thing with Charleston, South Carolina, and they're doing some work down there to find the siege lines in Charleston, which is kind of cool. Because a lot of where the siege lines where a lot of action happened is today bars and restaurants and all sorts of things like that. People don't realize, that even though it hasn't been cordoned off and set aside as parkland, it's still hallowed ground. People still fought and bled there, and there should be at least some sort of reminder in my mind.
And that happens to be one of the places that Mark Maloy is not allowed to visit anymore. So, how about I'm gonna get Mark riled up here. How about monuments? What's favorite Rev War monument?
Okay.
Because I had one in my mind for the historic site, but it's not really a well-known place, so it's a monument. But what do you think, Mark? Your favorite Rev War monument?
Okay, this one is an unheard of, little-known one that I think is very cool, and it's the statue of George Washington in Washington D.C. At Washington Circle, which is just north of Georgetown. Those people who are familiar, it's in Washington D.C., but it was erected and put up in the 1850s, 1858, I believe. It was sculpted by Clark Mills, and it shows Washington on his horse at the Battle of Princeton. And it's supposed to be the moment that Washington rides in between the two lines of the British and the American, and is reining his horse back, and the horse is stopped in its tracks with its ears ahead, obviously in the middle of battle, and Washington coolly sitting on top of the horse. But it's just, I think it just looks awesome. It has this great history of being built just prior to the Civil War, so it's been there for a while. And I think it commemorates Washington, and like I said, probably militarily speaking, his most important moment there at the Battle of Princeton. And there's another one that I wrote an ERW article about, and that's the one for Phil up at Baltimore, and their Washington Monument at the very top has a statue of Washington not doing anything militarily. He's standing there holding a piece of paper, but it's probably the other most important moment of his whole life, and that was resigning his commission, which happened in Maryland in 1783. So I think those two Washington monuments are very cool. So I really like it.
I would have to say, we were talking about Princeton. Well, the Princeton Battle Monument is pretty impressive there in the town itself. And also the Monmouth Battle Monument too, which I like, not just because it's for the Battle of Monmouth, but because the cornerstone of it was laid by George McClellan when he was governor of New Jersey. He gave a little dedication address there for it. So kind of full circle how during the Civil War and the years following, everybody's still hearkening back to the days of when we won our independence.
You had to pull in McClellan, didn't you, Billy? Kevin is somewhere jumping up and down. Our friend Kevin Pollack is going crazy right now hearing about George McClellan. What do you think, Phil?
So I'll stay in Billy's, I don't know, nearest hometown in New York, but still be a homer with my Marylanders. was the old monument for the Maryland Monument Marker for the Maryland 400 up at Lookout Park there in Brooklyn, Lookout Hill, excuse me, Prospect Park. I mean, one of those, I think it's one of Washington's greatest compliments to the entire state of Maryland or any of their native sons is, my God, what brave fellows I must lose this day. That's one. And then also saying one I've always liked for some reason, and I don't know why, is always the Nathaniel Green one at Guilford. It's just something about it. I mean, for a guy who, I mean, I feel like he's the epitome of the poor man's Washington, the failure at every battle, but he holds the army together. He gives pride to all those quartermasters because he does go down in history. So he's afraid he'll never be known in the annals of history. And yeah, he's just an amazing guy. Just something about that statue there. It's just always, maybe it's the walk up to it or whatnot, but I've always, anytime I'm at Guilford, I always spend a little bit of time in front of that one. I just think it's a great monument for a guy who proved himself. I mean, and through all those failures and overcame that limp that sent him home when he was in Marshall enough, and just learned everything by reading. I mean, look behind all of us. There's books. So I mean, we're Nathaniel Green learned everything by reading history. So good props. So those are the two there.
Another great general who didn't win much on the battlefield.
Exactly.
You know, still accomplished a lot. I'm going to go with one from my childhood, not too far from where I grew up. There's just west of Aldie on Route 50 here in Northern Virginia. There's a small little plaque on a stone pillar in the middle of a field. Our friend Travis Shaw has seen it. He works out there. It's to John Champ, who I'm sure Billy knows John Champ. John Champ was a sergeant major in the Continental Army and was, it's a long story. It's a great blog post about it I wrote a few years ago. But John Champ is picked to, go over to the British side. No one knows it other than Washington, a few of his closest aides. So he's to defect over to the British lines, and his job is to try to capture Benedict Arnold. And so, he's in New York City for a while. A couple of days before he's supposed to enact this plan, Arnold leaves to go south to Virginia, to which Champ has to go with him because he's serving in Arnold's Legion. And so one of the sad parts about this story is Champ is actually going to be in some of these smaller battles in Virginia fighting other Virginians because he can't, he has a hard time finding a chance of breaking away. He does break away, runs out of the British Army, ends up to the valley as a wanted man. He has a price on his head because everyone thinks he defected from the American Army. He does make it back. And his role has been revealed about what he was in charge to do, but he volunteered to do it. And to think about, just everyone thinking you're a traitor and people having a price on your head, and then the plan doesn't work out. And then you have to actually fight with the British against Americans here in Virginia, where he's from. It's a pretty amazing story. But his house was just west of Aldie, Virginia. And in the field, when I was a kid, I remember driving by this thinking, what is this pile? It was kind of a pile of stones, but since then they've actually kind of fixed it up, and there's a plaque. And if you were willing enough when I was younger to dare jumping in the bull field there, you could run down there and see the plaque. And it's a little monument to John Champ, who is a Loudoun County hero. They actually named a high school after him here in Loudoun a few years ago. No movement, Mark, on getting that changed, but hopefully we're good with John Champ. But John Champ has been a lot forgotten. He moves up to West Virginia. He's actually buried in Fairmont, West Virginia. Just a couple years ago, they actually put a stone marker, military marker at his grave. But it's a neat little marker. If you're driving down Route 50, it's mostly a Civil War area with the John Mosby highway there. But if you look off to your left as you're driving west from Aldie to Middleburg, you'll see the John Champ plaque, and it's a cool little monument.
Yeah, I think Champ was supposed to capture Arnold while he was going to the bathroom at night. It's when we're our most vulnerable.
Yeah, and there is a character in that TV series Turned that plays John Champ briefly. So it was kind of neat to see them at least know that story existed. So He's a neat character, and he comes back to Loudon. He's a farmer, kind of but think about what he volunteered to do is pretty amazing.
There are a lot of good mentions in the comments section. I see people mention the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Philadelphia. That is a very powerful place. If you've never been, it's just behind Independence Hall. If you go to Philadelphia, you got to go there because it's in Washington Square Park, which used to be a burial place. And in the 1950s, they actually excavated and found a soldier who had been killed during the war, and they put him in a special burial spot, and it's got a stone thing on top, and it says, under this tomb is one of Washington's soldiers. He died to give you liberty. And a statue of Washington, some great quotes, and an eternal flame. So I definitely agree with that. The other people mentioning, Washington statue in Union Square, New York City, which is great, showing him coming back into the city. There's another great Washington one in Richmond that I forgot to mention earlier too, and also has all great Virginians from the Revolution era underneath of him, which is really great. The Hugh Mercer statue in Fredericksburg, which is also really cool. It actually includes the Congress designated there should be a statue built to him during the war. It took 100 years later before they actually built it, but that's another great one. And I'm surprised Billy hasn't mentioned this one. A couple of people talking about the boot.
Boot.
Yeah, I was trying to give a non-Arnold answer. Yeah, that definitely is one
typecasting.
Of the monuments. Yeah. And that was obviously privately put up, and I think the man's name was DePeister. He was a Civil War veteran, but so that's his words on the back of it, where he says, "Dedicated to the most brilliant soldier in the Continental Army." I kind of have another favorite question. This one more so goes to the history side of things for us as historians. What is your favorite Rev War document or primary source?
Wow.
The Southern Campaign pension for me is the pension records are fantastic, especially if you're researching. I'm working on Camden right now. Mark's working on Charleston, I think. It's a great resource, and it's all not all of it, but a good majority of it has been put online. So it's easy accessible for anyone to get to. Especially during times of COVID, when a lot of these archives are closed right now and you can't get into these places that have all these great resources. The Southern Campaign's pension records are, for the most part, have been transcribed too as well, and they're online for anyone to see. So I'll point to that because that's what I'm spending my time on right now.
I'll say the Founders Online is a great resource as far as getting the letters of most of the major, Washington's letters and things like that. I think are, really important to understand, from that 30,000 foot level. And it's interesting because looking at the common soldier, it seems like it's fragmentary where there's, random letters from people here and there, or, either pension applications, or memoirs. And I think the most famous of those is Joseph Plum Martin's, which is just, it's kind of fun to read because, all the kind of his, he takes a little bit of humor looking back at his time in the Army and stuff like that, which I think, but it does kind of give you that kind of sense of what it was like for the common soldier. But Founders Online is a great tool to look through, and you can just search for keywords to find different letters from people about talking about certain subjects you're looking for. So
I think sorry, I was gonna say, for me, my favorite one to go back to and reread is the Charles Lee court-martial papers. And I was talking to Christian McBurney the other week on here, author of George Washington's Nemesis, and we brought up the point together that it's a very convenient document because everybody is giving their testimony at the same time and arguing with each other for us. So it isn't like taking a letter written, right after the battle and a letter written 6 months later and then trying to kind of cross-examine them to see what matches up. Everybody's doing that for us. So I think that courtroom kind of manuscript is really, really just invaluable. and being able to dissect what actually did happen.
And I guess I'll kind of go back to the Southern campaigns, but also Howard Williams writes some very interesting things about it. He's in various roles throughout the campaign. I mean, I think he's like the adjutant to Gates for a little bit, and then he's put in charge of some of the light infantry at the retreat to the Dan. And he's one of those guys that is initially was captured at Fort Washington, which breaks his health. But he continues to serve throughout the war, and yeah, his roles change in the Southern campaign. And he's one of those officers that seems to be there, and so it's kind of an interesting. And he actually had a very early biography done in the 1820s, like the times of Otho Holland Williams. So it just shows that he's remarkable that that quickly after the war, someone else that we don't recognize today actually had a 120-page brief sketches, as they called it, of the life and times of Otho Williams. So I'll do that one, obscure one, but really helped me when I was doing my work at George Mason for my graduate degree.
I think that's a great segue. I was going to follow up with one last question. Somebody asked us, since we're getting close to 8 o'clock, and Mark has a football game to go watch, supposedly. But that is, what are we reading? So let's talk about real quick what books we're reading. I'll just start off I'm reading John Beeks's available new biography of DeKalb, which is pretty good. Came out in 2019. If you're into DeKalb, not just Southern campaign, but his entire his life, even before the war, this is a really good book. I highly recommend it. It's well written, great maps, lots of great information. Lots of good primary source material as well. So I'm reading DeKalb, biography of DeKalb. Mark?
Well, I was going to go last.
Okay. I'm sorry.
But I'll go ahead and let Phil.
Yeah, well, Mark has to pick which Washington biography he's reading right now.
I'll admit I've been so there's ones that I obviously reading because I'm working on a few side projects, so you're reading through those. But the ones I'm on a French officer kick, I guess, since we went to the Yorktown campaign, and I was impressed by some of the French monuments and everything. And so I said earlier I was reading Lafayette. I'm pretty much finished it. This is the one I'm starting tonight on Rochambeau. I find it, I just don't know much about him. And the first page, I think, is just his first name. So I think I've already done the first name.
And his rank.
And his rank. So, but no, I'm on a French officer kick. So.
All right. I've been reading the same book since July of last year. And that's Rick Atkinson's The History Coming. I just keep putting it down and then having to pick it up like 3 months later to keep reading it. Very good book, very heavy, but still good. But I'm writing some articles on the Battle of the Monongahela and Fort Necessity right now. So the one book that I am going through that is always one of my go-to references for the French and Indian War in Western Pennsylvania is Guns at the Forks. And that covers everything that goes on around present-day Pittsburgh during the French and Indian War. Really good book.
All right, and so the Washington biography that I am currently reading is First and Always by Peter Enriquez, which is awesome. About 3/4 of the way through it at the moment. There it is. Yep. And it's fantastic for a couple reasons, because it's not a standard biography. He just kind of the author basically chooses some of the most fascinating or interesting aspects of Washington life and really delves in a deep look and basically tries to, make insightful ideas about, what made Washington who he was or whatever. So it gets very, very in depth, which I really enjoy, being the Washington connoisseur I am. But the reason why I wanted to go last is this is going to segue perfectly into our next thing. We're going to actually, in 2 weeks, on December 13th, at this time, we're going to have the author, Peter Enriquez, come on here, and I'm going to interview him and talk to him about this book. And he's great. He spoke at our ERW symposium last year about Washington. He's studied Washington his whole life, and has great insights into the man and his character and his importance in our country. So and we're going to be. He's also pretty much the subject matter expert on the death of Washington. So this biography of Washington is his second one. His other one was called Realistic Visionary, just fantastic. And he also wrote a small pamphlet just about Washington's death called He Died as He Lived. And he's going to be, so we're going to be talking on the anniversary of Washington's final illness. So hopefully be able to talk to him a little bit about that and get some information from him about that as well. But that's going to be our ERW Rev War Revelry on December 13th at 7 p.m. right here on the ERW Facebook.
And so in line with that, we're not having one next Sunday in December because of the holidays. We're doing every other week. So we'll be back, as Mark said, with Dr. Enriquez, who was one of my professors at George Mason University. It's a great book talking about his book. But Mark, we got Mark working very hard in December. Mark's working overtime. We're doubling his current salary that he makes for ERW right now. 0 times 2 is 0 still. But Mark's going to be doing Trenton and Princeton as well later in December, which ties in with our bus tour that we are working on right now. We hope to have more information up at the time. Mark, what's the date for that? I should know, but I don't.
So for the tour?
No, for the for your talk for the ERW.
That'll be the whatever 4th
Sunday. The 27th.
Yeah, so we'll be actually talking about 10 crucial days in the middle of the anniversary of 10 crucial days. So
right.
Battle of Trenton happened. So.
And we're hoping to have more details about the bus tour that we're doing next November of Trenton and Princeton with Mr. Mark Maloy. You get to spend 2 whole days with Mark. It's worth its weight in gold right there. I can tell you that from spending lots of time with Mark. It's worth it. But Mark and I are going to go up in January as well and do some videos that we're going to shoot in time up there. So stay tuned for that in January. But so we will be doing December 13th and December 27th here, not every Sunday, but every other Sunday, to give some of our guys here a little bit of a break over the holidays. We still have our symposium planned for May of next year. There's information on our blog for that. We're still going forward with that. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, we can get that through in May here in the city of Alexandria. That's the same lineup of speakers, which includes Mark, as we had scheduled for 2020, but of course, because of COVID, we pushed that to 2021. So more information about that on our website as well. And one thing too, Mark and I are doing tomorrow. Mark and I are meeting a good friend of ours, Dr. John Moss, at the United States Army Museum here in Northern Virginia. So if you all haven't heard, the Army has built a brand new museum here at Fort Belvoir, just outside Washington, D.C. Just opened up a few weeks ago. We got a sneak peek of it back in March, but it wasn't completed. And we're going in there tomorrow to look at the Rev War exhibit. And we'll probably talk about that somewhere on the blog post later about the exhibits there, about the American Revolution, pre-Civil War exhibits. I'm sure we'll look at the Civil War exhibit too, but we'll focus on the pre-Civil War exhibits. So that's, Mark and I are going to see each other tomorrow and do that. Do you guys have anything else? No. Well, thank you, everyone. Phil, I'll sign off for everybody, all right? Since you said hello. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. Like Phil says, this is our 34th program. We've been running since April 19th. We're going to keep them going. We're just going to take it every other week in December. So we'll see everybody in 2 weeks. And thanks again for watching. Take care. Be safe.